Hi, listeners. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ideological doctrine in favor of love, meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. I'm here with Ed Amos from the podcast Conspiracy Real. Hi, Ed.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So, how are you doing in New Zealand at the
Oh,
moment?
New Zealand's very lucky with coronavirus. It's been pretty much eliminated, or so they say at the moment. So we don't actually have any restrictions on at the moment. We're just checking into public places. So yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of those places, and there's this game Pandemic, isn't there, where it's like New Zealand's one of those places that's hard to get to.
Yeah, exactly. It's just right at the bottom, and it's got quite a small population, and you can only get there by air travel. So it's really an ideal country to get coronavirus under control.
Yeah, yeah. So, you're into conspiracy theories then. How did you get into conspiracy theories?
Yes. Well, I was about 20 when I really started to get obsessed with conspiracy research. Before that, I listened to a lot of Tupac and gangster rap, which made me aware that the war on drugs was about oppressing black people in the USA. And Richard Nixon's advisor actually admitted that this is true. Just a few years ago, after I started, I saw a video on 9/11, and it really shocked me. Like, I really did not think like the oligarchy would be capable of such a well, disgusting act. And the more I looked into it, it didn't add up. I've got a logical mind, so I knew something was amiss. Then I actually knew this Cambridge University scholar. I just knew he was really into his conspiracy stuff. I went and I confronted him about it all. And he essentially said the Illuminati were real. So I started researching it, I started preaching it. Then he shortly after developed terminal cancer, and he told his children that, yes, the Illuminati did in fact survive, and we are controlled by an oligarchy. So yeah, that's my origin story.
And you just like wanted to learn more since then,
I be- I became really obsessed. Like,
deep down the
I
rabbit
didn't
hole.
even, I was as deep as you can go, I'd say. I wanted to know it inside out, even though 9/11, it added up in my head that it was an inside job. I just checked everything meticulously over and over. I questioned myself a lot, thinking, can I possibly be right? Like what makes me so sure I'm right? I had a long journey of questioning myself, and also everyone around me was telling me I was crazy, or telling me to shut up, telling me I was a joke. But I persisted with my research. For example, I accused the royal family of being involved in paedophilia for many, many years. I'd say 9 years. And all this stuff about Virginia Giuffre and Prince Andrew obviously came out uh, very recently. So yeah, I was kind of validated, but I had to spend a long time being called unpatriotic, being called an idiot. Obviously, being in the UK, the royal family are a very big deal, and
Yeah.
criticizing them doesn't go down well.
So, do you agree with David Icke about the royal family?
What, that they're shape shifting lizards?
Yeah.
um, well, if I'm honest, no. I've done a lot of research into shape shifting lizards. I'm not going to say he's wrong. I don't think I can say for sure, 100% certainty that he is wrong, but I've never seen any proof worthwhile that they are shape-shifting lizards. And to be honest, I'm uncomfortable putting my neck out saying something if I
Yeah.
can't prove it, if I don't have a leg to stand on. I do know a lot about it, though. I can go over some of the evidence. So Jesse Ventura, he was the governor of Minnesota. He was a Navy SEAL. He did a TV series called Conspiracy Theory. He investigated this theory, and all he could pull up was some random people saying they had seen shape-shifting lizards. But I mean, I've got to be honest, how do we know they're not just, lying to get attention? And then there was some video footage, and he got like a professional to look at it to say that this footage hadn't been tampered with. And certain politicians' eyes, they looked kind of lizard-like, very subtly.
Yeah,
They looked lizard-like.
I've seen videos on it. Like, can you see if you zoom in? Like, I mean, there might be something to it. Maybe I'm not gonna dismiss it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you'd never know, but yeah, it just can't be proven. I've done some research recently into it. It's taking DMT and witnessing lizards and reptiles. I've met a number of people who have taken DMT and said they have seen like snakes and reptiles. And the interesting thing about DMT is it's an active ingredient in the drink. Forgive my pronunciation if I'm incorrect. I think it's called ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And yeah, people take this drink in like South America, and even like a group of 20 people, they all take it and they can all see the same thing, which suggests that maybe they are lifting some sort of veil and it's not all in their mind. So yeah, I came up with an experiment. I actually wanted someone to do ayahuasca or DMT in front of the royal family and see if any veil lifted.
Oh, that's a clever idea. I like that.
Obviously, it's very hard to do because
That'd be
it's
tripping.
illegal. But maybe some brave soul could do it for the sake of science. No, I'm not going to encourage the use of drugs, but I'm sure there's some experienced maverick out there who would be willing to step up to the task. And then, oh, sorry, go on.
Well, I mean, I've heard there's something I've heard about, like a lot of the royal family and also royal families and leaders and presidents throughout history, right? That there is this sort of lineage of like modified genetics.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not so much like they're reptilian shapeshifters outright, but more like maybe there's a bit of back in the day they might have had like extended skulls or something like the pharaohs, but that maybe those bloodlines have become watered down to the point that they look more or less human, and they're mostly human anyway.
Yes, absolutely. I've done much research into this topic. So the argument is, if you observe ancient societies, Mesopotamia, the Babylonians, the Aboriginals, they all come up with a dragon creature that has 6 limbs. So that's 2 arms, 2 legs or 4 legs, and then 2 wings. And evolutionary, this isn't seen elsewhere in the animal kingdom. So it's quite a coincidence that all these different civilizations come up with the dragon, even though they never meet each other. So it does make you wonder, maybe like the dragon was some sort of advanced alien, and maybe it was exaggerated in myths and legends. I mean, someone once said myths is just history exaggerated like through Chinese whispers.
Yeah, it's all traditions, so there is something to it.
Yeah, it is very interesting how it is coincidental that all these dragons appear in ancient civilizations and have continued throughout history, such as with St. George slaying the dragon in English history. But I mean, there are people out there, they have looked into this and they have said that 30% of people are scared of like snakes and lizards. So it's kind of natural that over 1,000 years that people would come up with monsters that are reptile-like. But saying that, it is quite a coincidence how they all look like 6-limbed dragons.
Yeah, but
Another,
like
oh,
not
sorry.
spiders or something.
Yeah. It is very interesting. And then, of course, they talk about the reptile, the snake in Adam and Eve. Maybe there was some truth to that. And there's, of course, St. Patrick, who drove out the snakes of Ireland. And they've said, are these all just, just stories that have been exaggerated for another purpose? But for me, one of the most interesting things is Vlad the Impaler. Are you aware of Vlad the Impaler?
Well, the story of Dracula's based on him, right?
Exactly. What Dracul means is dragon. So Vlad the Impaler, what he did, he kept the Ottoman Empire out of Europe because he was based in like around Romania, and
Yeah.
the Ottomans were attacking the Christian like kind of empire. So he kept them all out, the Ottomans out, but he was completely brutal. He used to boil people alive. He used to skin people alive. He used to cut off the breasts of women and feed them. And so he developed like a very satanic reputation. But interestingly, he was part of this order called Order of the Dragon.
Ah.
So and interesting enough, the royal family of the UK are actually directly descended from Vlad the Impaler.
Among other people, but that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people will just say I'm just, connecting dots that aren't there. But I mean, it could be. I wouldn't say it for definite, but I'm just kind of saying that these people aren't completely imagining things. There is, some interesting facts that like lead people to this conclusion. And David Icke ultimately concluded that these shape-shifting lizards descended from the constellation Draco thousands and thousands of years ago, and they came down and they interbred with
Oh,
humans
I've got some
and became
info.
their rulers.
I've got a book, Exopolitics, here.
Oh yeah, I haven't read that.
Well, apparently, if you can carry on with what you're saying, if you want to.
Oh yeah. I think that was basically it, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
well, so this has got some interesting information. This is Exopolitics by Michael E. Sala. Apparently, he actually served with the US military and actually met aliens.
Oh,
Right.
interesting.
So he categorizes aliens in three categories, right? The good shepherds, the protected parents, and the wise mentors. Now, the good shepherds aren't good shepherds. They just like to portray themselves that way. That includes the reptilians on Earth, living under the ground. They apparently they harvest human emotional energies. They're probably involved in the oligarchy and manipulating them or something. The Greys or the Zetas, from who are linked to the Orions, they're the they harvest human genetic material. So then there's the Draco reptilians. So there's more than one type of reptilians, and they try to gain control over our resources. Apparently, then there's the giant hominids from Lyra or Nibiru, and that they want to get use of our resources as well. Apparently, then there's protective parent. So there's like leftovers from Lemuria and Atlantis, and they try to help us out. Apparently, then there's those from Sirius, Pallades, and Altair, and they try to help us out. Apparently, and they oppose the Greys. Then there's the wise mentor ones that just give us like advice and don't really take a side. Yeah, and that's like Arcturus, Sirius, and Orion. He mentions Orion here as if they're not the negative side, but maybe things have changed since Orion's back in the day. But anyway, there's lots of interesting information in this, and I've barely even looked at it.
Yes. Sorry, what did he do? This guy who said all of this.
Well, on the back it doesn't actually say that he. Okay, so He's worked in the field of ET ratio research for almost 70 years. The US government. Okay, this isn't. Give me a sec.
All good, all good.
So if we, I'm going to Google him for a sec. I know this guy's legit because I did research beforehand.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, there's Paul Hellyer, of course, who said aliens were all real. He was the Canadian Defence Minister, and he's the longest serving member of the Privy Council in Canada. So there are some respected people out there. Also, Lockheed Martin, like scientists, have said they've seen aliens. One of them showed a picture of him with an alien and on his deathbed and declared that aliens were real. So, I mean, I'm definitely open to aliens being real. President Jimmy Carter and President Gerald Ford as well, they have said they want the knowledge on UFOs declassified and that the American public deserve to know what's going on. So, I mean, I think there's definitely something going on. There's definitely, at the very least, high-tech technology being covered up for some. I can't imagine why. But yeah, I'm very, very open that aliens have been visiting us for some time.
Oh yeah. So there's this guy. He founded like EXO Use and stuff. He's written books about it, and he's got a PhD on the subject. So he's like one of the main experts on the subject.
Interesting.
So yeah, so that's something pretty interesting. So we've covered aliens. We can maybe go back to it later in more detail, but
Okay.
you're very interested in media manipulation.
Yes. Yes, well, media manipulation is a very real thing. For example, Stephen Hawking boycotted Israel for calling it apartheid. And yeah, you could see how the media tried to cover up him or say that he didn't turn up to an Israeli conference for another reason. And then he came out and corrected them after they had lied about it and said he had boycotted for the Palestinian cause. There's definitely a cover up going on around Israeli apartheid.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it is because this oligarchy that has hijacked the media is using Israel as part of its imperialist doctrine for full spectrum dominance. So it's using Israel to start wars. I mean, some people, they say, oh, if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic, but no, not at all. I mean, I'm all for Israel existing. I think history has now made it that we can't get rid of Israel, and much of the population, they're just innocent and just trying to live a life. But yeah, it's basically to start wars in the Middle East. Like they want to use it to start a war with Iran ultimately, and by fueling fire in the settlements, the Palestinians retaliate. Iran helps the Palestinians, and then Israel has an excuse to attack Iran. And
Okay.
this was exposed by General Wesley
The
Clark.
conflict both ways is between the Palestinians and the Israelis is encouraged by, and maybe does that mean the actual Israeli citizens are just sort of, they're just almost victims as well of this whole thing?
Yes, they are. I mean, there are some absolutely fantastic Israelis and Jews out there who, of course, expose all of this, such as Norman Finkelstein. He's a famous professor. Noam Chomsky, one of the most cited academics in the world, is Jewish. And yeah, there have been large numbers out of the military who have said that how the Israelis are acting is disgraceful. Haaretz, one of the oldest Israeli newspapers, regularly exposes apartheid policies.
Right.
You see, Israelis, they've got for a start, they are to a large degree brainwashed. And Israel is actually controlled by an oligarchy, which is very important to know. For those who don't know, an oligarchy is, or you can call it a plutocracy, is when a nation is run by the super elite, the
Isn't that like
richest of
most of the world like that?
pretty much, yeah. To be honest, yes. So yeah, so what Israelis? I mean, because they've had a hard time, the Israelis. Um, Obviously, the Holocaust was absolutely disgusting, and then they were put in Israel. But what you need to know, and it's very hard for a lot of Israelis to take this, is that Israel wasn't created because of the Holocaust. The Holocaust enabled a plan that was already
Yeah, I
established
heard about that.
by Rothschild, yes, with Lord Balfour, like a good 20 or so years
Yeah,
before World War II ended.
around
And
World War
so
One, they were
they
talking
would
about it.
already agreed to give them Israel.
They
Mm-hmm.
wanted, so there was this plan to create a state of Israel, yeah, beforehand.
Mm-hmm. The
Um,
Balfour Declaration, yes.
I wonder if certain authorities allowed pogroms to happen, no, hoping that they'd be able to create a situation where they could move lots of Jewish people to Israel as an excuse for setting up a state, so that they could have a state that they could control in the Middle East. Why would they want
Yes.
that? So they probably knew that oil would become more significant in this new economy
Mm-hmm.
because they were clued in, right? Now I'm kind of filling the gaps here. So
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Western empires, we've been carving up the Middle East since the Sykes-Picot Agreement after World War One. We created like Saudi Arabia, pretty much. Western empires were responsible for founding Saudi Arabia. And what you got to remember with Israel, it has Jerusalem, and we've been going into crusades for Jerusalem for 1,000 odd years. And it's been conquered by Muslims, Jews, Christians over and over again. So why is that? And it's because it holds some of the holiest sites between all the Abrahamic religions. So it's a very important strategic point. It generates a lot of wealth, it generates a lot of pride, and so they've always fought for it. And so what we've seen here is actually part of an imperialist doctrine that's unfolded and that was planned long before the Holocaust, so they could take Israel to unite it in this empire. But what we've got to know is that historically, we've got to assume that Jerusalem is in fact doomed, because it keeps going around in cycles of conquering. So yeah, I think it's just, unless there's a big change, it's only a matter of time before Iran, the Shia Islam, wants to go to war.
yeah, and it depends on how much they get the support of the US. Um, if they
Oh,
obtain the support of the US, they might be okay, but that's ultimately like that's kind of a two-way thing, isn't it? Because they kind of depend on the US a lot, so they're subordinate to the US.
mm, yeah, they've got very close ties, the US and Israel.
I've got a theory
And
about this.
go ahead.
So we're talking about the divide and conquer and how certain states are used to manipulate world events and to create wars. And then certain people benefit a lot, like especially in banking. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. They, for example, I'm known to lend money to both sides in wars, like World War II or even the Napoleonic War, right?
Yeah,
And even you
yeah,
could even bring this into
yeah,
aliens. Like for a
yeah,
long time,
Napoleonic, yeah.
arguably for a long time, there's been this influence on human power politics, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You could even bring it back to Roman times or earlier. You could bring it back to, you could even say that it's Orion influence. Have you heard about the Orion aliens?
Just briefly when you mentioned it earlier, but no, I
All right.
hadn't any
Well,
existing knowledge.
there's something called the. I'm going to go back into aliens for a bit, but there's something called the Orion aliens and the Orion Wars, right? So they're these a long time ago. They're these group that they're very focused. There's two main spiritual approaches, I suppose you could say, in among aliens. I suppose that's according to New Age stuff, anyway. There's the ones that are serving others, the ones that are serving themselves. Serving others is about love and peace, I suppose, and serving self is about power and domination. Now, the ones that have got power and domination might include, for example, the Anunnaki and the Orions. And apparently, the Orions came here and they influenced certain religions and made them more patriarchal, for example, like maybe even Israeli religion. But yeah, so what I've heard is that I suspect that this sort of divide and conquer thing is a very service to self thing, and leaders are often that that way inclined. Because if you want to, if you are born into a family, right, where you want to be, if you're incarnated into a family that's very prominent, one of these that maybe you're planning before your lifetime to have like a service to self life where you seek power and domination. And so I say I'm weaving this big thing out of this, but honestly feeling like for a long time, power politics between nations has been manipulated by elites and perhaps even by self-serving aliens. So what do you think of that in light of the Israeli thing and other wars?
Well, it's actually what I believe. I don't know about the aliens. I mean, it's possible, but as I said, I don't like to put my neck out without some solid evidence.
That's fine. I respect that. I don't really rely on evidence so much, admittedly, but yeah.
Okay, but certainly what we've seen here with Israel, and I'll really go into this. It's actually goes back to the Illuminati.
Yeah.
So I could give a quick rundown of this. So the Illuminati was created in 1776. Originally, it was to unite certain academics, bankers, and European royalty to challenge the church as head of state. But it evolved, into this imperialistic plan for domination. And the big argument is, did the Illuminati just dissolve, or did it survive and found loads of other secret societies? So I'm building up to your previous point, don't worry. So what we can see is that Winston Churchill versus Bolshevism, where he actually admitted that the Illuminati had survived into the 20th century. There have been other proofs throughout history, such as there was a book called Proofs of a Conspiracy. I think that was written in the 19th century. And that said the Illuminati had survived and were responsible for the French Revolution. But all this other evidence is not as big as Winston Churchill, of course, admitting it. And he was a high ranking, I think he was an admiral at this time that he said this. Okay, so here's the first piece of evidence that they survived into the 20th century. And then also there was a Hoover Institute research fellow called Anthony Sutton. He was also a professor at a number of universities. And he researched the finances of the Bolshevik Revolution, the finances of the Nazi war machine, and he researched the secret society at Yale called the Skull and Bones. What Anthony Sutton proves academically, and his work, it was never, proven wrong. People just used to dismiss it, but there was never an argument given. But what he proved was essentially that the Wall Street bankers were responsible for cultivating the Nazi war machine and cultivating the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. And if you look at Winston Churchill's quote on the Illuminati, this actually matches with, because he references the Bolshevik Revolution. So this actually makes sense.
Does this
And
involve
then,
Lenin? That him being a plant or something?
Yeah. That's a big topic. Yeah, I'll stay on track for here for now. So then he researched the Skull and Bones Society at Yale, and he actually proves that the Skull and Bones Society, he got records from this woman, forget the pronunciation again, I think she's called Charlotte Erbswith. Sorry guys if I got that wrong. Her father and grandfather were in the Skull and Bones Society, and she gave Anthony Sutton all these records about the Skull and Bones Society. And then after Sutton researched it, he concluded that the Skull and Bones Society was instrumental in coordinating the finances for the Nazis and for the Bolshevik Revolution. Wow. And what's most interesting is that he actually proves that the Skull and Bones Society is a chapter of the Illuminati. So basically, an organization called the File and Claw, they broke into the Skull and Bones headquarters and they went through all of their stuff. And they found that the Skull and Bones Society and the Illuminati had the same initiation ceremony. Not only that, they found that the Skull and Bones Society descended from a secret German society, which, of course, the Illuminati were.
Yeah.
So now that you know all of this knowledge, I'm going to drop a bit of a bomb on you. So there's this legendary letter. Some call it a hoax, but it's not. And I'm going to explain why. It's called Albert Pike's Plans for 3 World Wars. The argument is that these 3 world wars are planned, and that the 2 that we've already had were planned years in advance as a way to divide and conquer society and to restructure the power plays around the world and the positions of power. So, I mean, what you've got to know is that this letter, and it perfectly describes World War I and World War II. For example, World War II, the letter says Nazism must be destroyed to bring a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. And this letter, a lot of people say it's fake, but what you got to know, it was in a book in 1925. And World War II started in 1939. And I believe Israel was founded in 1947.
Wait, this is before Hitler. Before Hitler came up with they gave him Nazism as an idea.
Essentially, yes.
They groomed him, right?
Well, yeah, it goes back, I believe, to the Thule Society. But this
links to aliens there, but we're not going to that.
Yeah, I'll just finish off explaining this.
You go ahead.
Just be a minute. So it was in a book in 1925. No one even knew who Hitler was really in 1925. And it said in 1925, Nazism must be destroyed to bring a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. This letter was in a book written by Cardinal Rodriguez of Chile. And a lot of people say, no, I don't believe this. But S. Brent Morris, who is a 33rd degree Freemason and a head Freemason researcher, he wrote in his book, A Complete Idiot's Guide to Freemasonry, he clearly says that this letter was in a book in 1925. And the Third World War is said it will start from Israel starting a war with Islam. And today we see Israel, as I've explained, it is kind of doomed for disaster. And General Wesley Clark exposed there is a plan to attack Iran.
Right. So to clarify, if we write to be World War I, was the idea to create a world war where Germany loses, and then bring the Nazis into Germany, create the Nazi Party, create this Second World War, which they would inevitably lose. Well, they'd be planning. The plan is that they'll lose, and then the state of Israel would be created as a result of that one, and then which would create tension in the Middle East with Islam, and
Yes.
potentially create the risk of more of terrorism,
Mm.
making people more anti-Islam and making them more likely to be a world war involving Islam.
Exactly. And today we can see there's a lot of hatred for Islam among Western society. And yeah, ultimately, this world war hasn't started, I believe, because Albert Pike couldn't foresee the creation of the nuclear bomb. So we've gone through this period of mutually assured destruction. But I believe as the elites have gotten more advanced, that they still want to do this plan. And as I said, there's the plan to attack Iran, and we're 100 seconds to midnight, so it doesn't look good. But yeah, ultimately, yeah, this Illuminati like network. I don't think the Illuminati still exists. Well, they might do, but the network that they created today, yeah, they've been using people's beliefs to divide and conquer and move power plays.
Do you think they've
And of
just
course,
adapted into becoming the oligarchy instead?
yes, I think they've had to adapt. Um, yeah, well, some think that maybe coronavirus is one of their new plans. I don't know about that.
There's two theories I've come across. One is that it's their plan and that they're
Mm,
trying to like kill off, it's one either to control the population or reduce population. But there's
mm,
another theory that the planet herself, Gaia, is the creator is doing it in a sense to sort of bring about a situation where we become more spiritual. So maybe it's both. I don't know.
uh, yeah, what I would say is that the coronavirus statistics has certainly been exaggerated. Yeah, like statistically, if you're under 60 and don't have any pre-existing conditions, your chances of dying are very, very slim.
Yeah.
So I believe I don't entirely know what's happening, but I do know that they're being exaggerated, and it's crashing the economy. And the super elite have made, I think, over $1 trillion because people are using their services more, and because people are going out of business.
Yeah, I do think it's at the very least being taken advantage of, right? And even with 9/11, I mean, I
Yes.
agree that 9/11 was an inside job, right? But even if it wasn't, I mean, the way it was taken advantage of is just transparent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can talk about this if you want to, but yeah, I mean, the hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. We attacked Iraq and Afghanistan, countries that didn't have anything to do with it. I mean, we said all this stuff about Saddam, but what we got to remember is we originally backed Saddam Hussein. And yeah, just all this hatred of Islam that's been stirred up as well.
And then,
It's,
so there's Osama bin Laden, right? And there's also
mhm.
hatred of the West being deliberately stirred up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you bomb people, if you attack them and steal their resources, you're going to piss a load of people
I
off.
mean, I also think that maybe there's other means as well. I think like with these sides of things, both sides are always supported. They never just go for one side. I don't think it's as simple as like the West are the bad guys. And it's it's as you said, like it's the Illuminati or the oligarchy. They're just divide and conquer, right?
Mm.
So I think that I know I'm interviewing you, right? But I think that the
Go on.
9/11 thing is fundamentally linked to that three-stage plan because it's obviously linked to the Islam thing, which
Exactly. That's what I believe. Yes, I believe. Yeah. I mean, I just think these lot in control, they don't believe in God. They they just want to reduce the population. It's easier to kill 1 million people than control 1 million people. And yeah, I believe this is the plan. I mean, it adds up at the end of the day. It sounds insane, but the evidence is there. I mean, anyone can look this up. You can read Anthony Sutton's work for free. That you can find free PDFs of it
So where does Bill Gates fit
online.
into this?
Bill Gates, is kind of a self-made billionaire. Kind of, he networked a lot. He was very good with his marketing, and he was ushered into the Bilderberg Group, which is like a big meeting place for the oligarchy. And Bill Gates, he pretty much controls the World Health Organization because he gives it so much money. So the argument is, I mean, this pandemic happened. People knew it was coming for years. Bill Gates even has been warning of a pandemic, and of course, like there's been no preparation. Everything's been locked down, and you see all these billionaires making billions and billions out of it. So the theory is, again, it is a theory. I mean, I can't say for 100% sure. It's a theory that I'm pretty certain on, but I'm not going to say it's a fact. The theory is that Bill Gates actually helped to stimulate coronavirus, or maybe even released it, just to shift the distribution of wealth into the hands of the oligarchy.
Yeah, that's plausible.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to prove.
So here's the thing: it definitely damaged the economy, right? But
Oh, yes.
if 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 wealth is a source of power, so it might be a redistribution of power more than wealth per se,
Mhm.
because they're already loaded. They don't need the money.
No, they don't need the money, but the more money you have, the more powerful you are.
Maybe it's
And
the relative power to the people compared to the elites.
yeah, yes, yes. Well, people are waking up to all these conspiracies. I mean, even the Gulf of Tonkin launched the entire Vietnam War. That was
Yeah.
admitted to be an inside job. So I think that the elite are getting scared. They're scared of this wave of information that's hit humanity. I mean, Rockefeller, I can't remember which one of the Rockefellers himself, he said we should have never invented the internet because all this digital information is out there and it can't be stopped, no matter how hard they try, which they are trying to do. But
Yeah, they definitely are.
yeah, just look at all the censorship on social
It does
media.
show they make mistakes. It's not total control, but some people seem to suggest it is, which is a bit pessimistic.
It's not total control. They're outnumbered by a lot. It's what you've got to remember, and their illusions have been shattered. I mean, they've been brainwashing us with the mainstream media for a long time. And any listeners who doubt me, I'd say look into the BAFTA award-winning journalist John Pilger's work on the mainstream media, where he exposes it all. Yeah, so they control the resources, they control the big resources, they control the big weapon contractors, they control the big banks like the World Bank, the IMF, the Bank for International Settlements, the central banks, then like Goldman Sachs, all the big banks. They control the lending, so they can direct things, because obviously they can say, no, we don't want to lend these guys money. We don't want to lend you guys money, for example, to go to the moon, to extract helium-3, which can like power the world for 1,000 years. No, we're going to lend money to you going into the Middle East. You, who's going to get the oil, that's who we're going to lend money to. And then they've also can control interest rates, so they can actually make a world economy slow down. And of course, you look at the governments, we're all in massive debt. I can't remember the US figure, but it's well over I think it's over $1 trillion of debt. And as Napoleon said, like the hand that gives is more powerful, and that's why bankers can control governments. Lord Rothschild as well himself said, I think this was about 200 years ago, give me control of a country's currency and I care not who writes its laws.
So
So
do you think cryptocurrency is a good alternative?
yes, I do. There's less control over it. I've invested a little bit into cryptocurrency. I mean, it's kind of created by people mining it, and its value is determined by how much is like mined and how much it is used, and yeah, and how important it's going to be. I think it does have the potential to challenge their power. I mean, if a load of people invested into Bitcoin, it would immediately make it more valuable. I mean, ultimately, we just got to make it really, really easy to use Bitcoin. Yeah, there's not everywhere accepts Bitcoin, for example. But I would recommend investing in some Bitcoin and maybe some Monero. That's a good one. It can't be traced. Yeah.
Well, so here's something controversial, perhaps. So, when it comes to conspiracy theories, what do you think's going on with Trump?
Oh, Trump. I mean, a lot of people, they in conspiracy circles, they are kissing his ass. Alex Jones, yeah, loves him, I believe. Donald Trump actually came onto the Alex Jones show and promised him he'd do all of this stuff. And Donald Trump has done some good things. I was very happy with his actions around Syria. Um, Stephen Hawking, he said the Syrian war must end or it threatens much of the life on planet Earth. And Donald Trump really has diffused things in Syria, whereas Hillary Clinton wasn't going to.
Hmm.
But then again, like it's a hard one. I would say I would support him because I think he's the lesser of two evils. His climate change policy does worry me. A lot of people in conspiracy circles will say climate change is a hoax. Personally, I believe in it. I mean, Noam Chomsky, he believed in it. Stephen Hawking believed in it. It makes sense when you compare the surface temperature of Venus. Venus is the second closest planet to the sun, and its atmosphere is the thickest and the most polluted, but that's why it's the hottest surface temperature. So I am worried about Donald Trump's stance on climate change, because the question comes, okay, maybe he doesn't want to nuke us all off, but maybe he just wants to flood 1 billion people to death. Or maybe he just doesn't give a shit and thinks, oh, I'll just make a load of money with my oil buddies and then I'll be dead in 40 years or whatever, and it won't be my problem. So Donald Trump, I would say, keep scrutinizing him. And if the science is wrong about climate change, there's no excuse. I mean, people are getting paid off one way or the other. I mean, there's no matter what you either believe there's a conspiracy of people getting paid off to say climate change is a hoax, or people getting paid off to say like climate change is real when it isn't. But as I said, I believe in it. So I would say yes. Let's not stir shit up in the Middle East, but ultimately I'd love to move to renewable energy, and this is our planet. We got to treat it right, and we can treat it right, and we shouldn't let a load of greedy bastards ruin where we live, because the
Right.
planet is a beautiful thing and it's priceless.
We do need to take care of the planet, and it's a pity what's happening. Because even if you ignore global warming, there's all this pollution, all the plastic. That's concerning. I've
Yeah.
got two more questions about Trump, though.
Okay.
One, is he a Russian agent? And two, is he. It's so. Is the situation which he came in to resolve in the public's mind, a setup Manchurian candidate situation?
Okay. So is he a Russian agent? I don't think he's a Russian agent. Does he have ties with Russia? Yes. I believe he borrowed some money from Russia. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. I mean, if we can have an alliance with Russia, I would like to have an alliance with Russia. I'd like to have an alliance with China. I'd like to work with the countries of the world to explore space. Ultimately, that's what I'd love to see, to move into a Star Trek-esque sort of world.
That'd be cool.
Oh God, I'd love that. But
It might.
yeah, well, you never know. They
Depends which way
found
the
water on the
awakening
moon.
goes, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Elon Musk has made some moves to Mars recently. 1 million people in 5 years he wants on Mars. That would be interesting. But yeah, I don't think he's a Russian agent, but I think maybe there is something going on with the Russians. I certainly don't think, he works for Spetsnaz or anything, but I think maybe he has some ties with the big Russian, because there are Russian oligarchs as well who are separate from the Illuminati. They kind of broke away from the Bolshevik Revolution, and it seems, and Putin, I think he does control a lot of Russia, and they're also like Chinese oligarchs. But so I think Trump's got some ties with some big Russian dogs, and yeah, he's doing some things. He's a lot more Russian friendly than Hillary Clinton, for example. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't want to be, a bitch of Russia, but I like to be friends with Russia. So as long as he's not creating like disgusting policies because of it, then I don't think it's a bad thing if he is in the pocket of a Russian, which I'm not saying he is, but yeah, whatever keeps peace in the Middle East, I'm game for.
Oh, I see. For you, it's whatever counters their 3-stage plan.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm my view on the Trump thing is it's complicated, because on one hand, I kind of cautiously like him, or at least I'm inclined to, but it's almost too convenient, right? Like,
I know what you mean.
and then there's the QAnon thing, which is almost like deifying him. It's just a bit like there's a theory that QAnon is a, what's the word called? A psychop.
Oh yeah.
So it's just the idea that, what if, okay, so with the whole culture war and with the whole situation with lots of industry leaving and going to China, maybe those two things are to set up a situation of resentment whereby you get some groups in politics in America who are like really pro social justice and stuff like that. And then another group are very anti it, and it's stirring up this conflict between them. Two, stirring up this resentment of China and immigration and stuff like that. And then create this situation where you got this keg of like, it's to get this situation going where people are going to vote for someone like Trump, right? And if you set up, if he was chosen ahead of time, he would be the perfect person for this role, right? I mean, he's technically an actor. He's been in shows. He's this big personality. Now, maybe he really is a good guy trying to help, right? Maybe, but it's just like, it's so convenient. Like, I used to be a libertarian for a long time, right? So I was right. No, I'm not anymore. I mean, I moved past that, but it would be so convenient to be like, yes, he's a savior. He's doing all these things. He's beating the left. But like, we've got to focus more on coming together, right?
Yeah. I know what you mean. Like, well, he came up conveniently. I mean, there's a theory out there that, maybe oligarchs are disagreeing, like how we should take humanity. And like, this is what Alex Jones said, that the oligarchs were warring. I find it hard to believe Donald Trump is a complete errand boy of the big oligarchy. I was very happy with how he handled Syria, but then again, he did rip up the Iran agreement, and which wasn't good. And yeah, and so it really does. It does worry me. Obviously, he's kind of started a trade war again with China. But what I would, I mean, I mean, I don't trust any politician 100%. It is a hard one, but ultimately, I mean, you just need to protest any sort of war mongering. We need to protest climate change. And I mean, I can't say for sure. I'd like to believe Trump is just a bit of a renegade. I just see him as a wild card. I don't
I'm
necessarily,
inclined to see him that way. Yeah.
yeah, I don't see him as like some sort of messiah, but I kind of see him as someone who'll give the middle finger. And whereas Hillary Clinton was given loads of money for a campaign, Donald Trump is obviously very wealthy, and he'll just turn around and go, "No, I'm doing things my way," and that is why I supported him. And also, what other alternative? People aren't going to vote for a third party. Ultimately, I'd like to see Jesse Ventura in, but all I'd say is just keep an eye on Donald Trump. Don't let him start a war with China. Don't let him start a war with Iran. Don't
Yeah.
let him ruin the planet, because he might just be like, oh, I can't be bothered with a world war. He might just think, oh, I'll just do my thing. But at the end of the day, he hasn't started a world war yet, and he didn't start a war with Iran yet, and he didn't start a war with Syria. So I'm just going to focus on that. But don't bow down to him. Don't worship him. Just remember, he's just a man, and he could turn on a dime. That's all I can really say on Trump.
That's quite a balanced perspective, because a lot of the time people are very much one side or the other.
Yeah,
I respect that.
yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. I think that's part of the whole divide and conquer.
Yeah, they
It's called the
fuck with your head, don't they?
It's called the Hegelian dialect. Yeah, yeah, that's why I'd love to see a third party rise in America. I wanted Ron Paul to win. Going back to the libertarian argument, I was a big Ron Paul supporter in America. Ron Paul, he's another guy who pretty much said, "Yeah, we're controlled by an oligarchy." He's made references to the New World Order as well. That's something I would like to talk about. So ultimately, the oligarchy does have a plan for a one world government for those who are skeptical about having a world war. But you got to remember, world war needs to happen to create a one world government, or we need to unite together. But at the moment, it looks more like a world war. And James Warburg, big dog, he admitted, you can look at his quotes, he admitted there's a plan for a one world government. David Rockefeller wrote in his memoirs that he wants a one world government. So we know these elites are planning a one world government.
You know, the unity thing is an interesting issue for me, because on one hand, spiritually, I'm very big on the concept of unity, but I'm cautious about the idea of one world government. So
Yeah.
maybe we should work together as a whole, but not under one banner.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, maybe like something like if the EU, say if the EU was called like the WU, the World Union,
Maybe
and then
more
we all
decentralized. Sorry,
contributed. Oh yeah.
something decentralized, a confederation at most.
Yeah, I would love that. I've thought about this before. Maybe something, you know, our top like scientists and engineers and economists of the world could all get together in this think tank, and they would all have to do whatever was best for society. Then each government would give them money so they could help to evolve the world,
But isn't that
kind
how
of
the
like
Illuminati was set up?
um kind of, but they don't do what's best for the world. I
Yeah, so
mean,
that's what
they
I'm saying.
suppress.
Like, keep in mind, I would argue potentially, though, that experts, scientists, play a similar role to priests in the past. So a
Mm,
technocratic approach, I think that I'm not saying it can't work, but we should be careful with that.
mm, mm. Yes, I mean, it'd have to have 100% transparency. To be honest, I think all their meetings should be on video. They should all be televised, so we all know what's going on, and all the documentation should be released, so we know they're not doing anything dodgy. I mean, look at Bilderberg Group or look at Bohemian Grove. We know all these oligarchs are meeting up, but there's no media coverage of any of it.
Yeah, that's not right.
No.
I mean, if they haven't got anything to hide,
Yeah, I mean, and these things were kept secret for years. I mean, Bilderberg's, I think it's been going on for over 50 years now. It only really came into light in the media in recent years. Before then, it was just, some hardcore investigative journalists who would cover it. And Bohemian Grove, they mention that once in a blue moon. I've heard all sorts of shit about Bohemian Grove, like they were doing heroin and underage prostitutes. They had gay porn stars going. Richard Nixon, he's in one of his tapes. He said Bohemian Grove, his exact words. I don't want to offend any homosexuals out there, but this is what Nixon said. He said Bohemian Grove was the most goddamn faggy thing he'd ever seen. So, I mean, we've got all these Republicans going to Bohemian Grove, all these hardcore Christians saying, oh, gayness is against God, which is, of course, absolute bullshit.
some of them are gay themselves.
Yeah, they're secretly having sex with gay porn stars, it seems.
Wow. So that, I feel like, do you want to talk about how Epstein fits into this then?
Epstein's a son of a bitch.
All right.
Epstein, excuse my French. Yeah, Epstein. So Epstein, you got to know that he had ties to Mossad. Mossad is like the secret intelligence agency of Israel. I think his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, like her father was tied into it. She was tied into it. I think Epstein's dad was tied into it. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that. And so Epstein was trafficking all these underage girls. I mean, there are stories of him like raping 11-year-old girls. And so he was trafficking all these underage girls to high-ranking members of society, and he was actually videoing. So there's probably a video, I don't know if it's been destroyed, of Prince Andrew raping a 17-year-old sex slave. And so all these videos he would keep and he would use, and then he would blackmail these powerful people, so they do what he'd want. For example, when Epstein was first caught, he got a sweetheart deal. And so instead of being arrested and charged for trafficking underage sex slaves, he was charged for soliciting sex from a minor. So he got a slap on the wrist, essentially. I think he was actually allowed to leave prison. This was under his conditions. He could leave his prison, go out and do his thing, and then he'd have to just spend the night at prison. I mean, and how do you think he got this deal?
That's
And
corruption, right?
I think he had tapes. I imagine he had tapes of some big lawyers and judges, or some big, or maybe even some senators. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff.
Right.
Senators being involved with
I mean,
sex
if you're in his
trafficking.
position, you would do that. I mean, that would be the ruthless thing to do, right? And if you're working with very powerful people, I'm wondering, like, so was he working for someone else or was he doing it himself?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, he did have Mossad connections. Maybe Mossad, well, we know Israel is controlled by an oligarchy. So the oligarchy, obviously Rothschild is a big player. Israel was promised to him in the Balfour Declaration, to him and the Zionist Federation. So there is a theory that maybe the Rothschilds had something to do with Epstein blackmailing all these high-ranking members of the world, but it's just a theory.
Oh, yeah. But let's speculate a little bit here. That's
All
interesting
right.
because you've heard about the Cabal, have you?
Yes, yes.
There's 13 families, some people say 12,
Yes,
about
yes, yes.
and the Rothschilds are supposedly one of these families.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unfortunately, some people they only focus on that and they go into genuine anti-Semitism, which is unfortunate because
Mm.
only one of those families, as far as I'm concerned, is Jewish. I'm not sure about that, but that's my impression. But if
Yeah,
this is so, the idea is there's this pyramid. You've seen that pyramid, right, of
yeah, yeah,
control, right? So
yeah,
this
yeah.
top, there's this council, and that
Mm.
they control everything that goes on indirectly. Everything goes below that. So if they weren't using Epstein as a way to control lower echelons of the pyramid,
Mm.
maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, um, just quick side point. Yeah, this whole anti-Semitic conspiracy stuff is part of. It's actually part of a disinformation campaign to muddy the waters of these conspiracy topics. For example, the Rockefellers, who are a very big family and who are involved with the Bank for International Settlements and the central banks. This is all exposed by the historian Carol Quigley, professor at Georgetown University, exposes all these big families who control the central banks and everything. Another thing for your listeners, check that out. Really good information. Yeah, so Rockefeller isn't Jewish. Um, so
Are the Rothschilds
and
Jewish?
the Rothschilds are Jewish, but
I'm just wondering
they
though,
don't believe in God.
so they're not really. The fact they're Jews is utterly irrelevant then.
Yes, they. I mean, ultimately, they've the Rothschilds have financed a lot of money into Zionist organizations. They've pumped a lot of money into these big Jewish organizations, such as B'nai B'rith um, and the Anti-Defamation League, and they've kind of hijacked Judaism to a degree. It's a bit like how Saudi Arabia hijacked Sunni Islam to a
Yeah, the
degree.
Wahhabist thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the same principle. I mean, the Rothschilds, according to Carol Quigley, they were at the heart of the Bank for International Settlements, and the Bank for International Settlements for keeping the Nazi economy strong. So,
So is
uh,
Wahhabism supported by the Rothschilds
um, yeah, I believe it's
or
all
the
part of
365?
it. I mean, I can prove that if you look into the history of Saudi Arabia, you can prove it was founded by a imperialist. I think even Britain, it was founded by Western powers. There
This
was
is where
some
World
deals
War One
struck.
comes in, right? Because World War One
Yes.
meant that obviously one side or the other, the Ottomans were going to be on one of the sides, which means that the Ottomans were going to be fighting against the Arabians. It gives an opportunity to bring in Saudi Arabia.
Nick, you
The
there?
Benians. Sorry?
Oh, sorry, you just blanked. There's a problem with the connection. Can you
Is
hear me?
this a conspiracy to undermine our connection?
Uh, you never know. I'll never forget the time I found out that I had blood relatives murdered in the Holocaust on my grandmother's side. Immediately when I found out, all the power just cut. All the power in my house cut as I was talking to my mum. It was pretty freaky. um, yeah, like yeah, this is what. So it helps me get away with saying these sort of things as well. Luckily, um, so oh, sorry. So we're talking about. Sorry, what were you saying? I
Well,
didn't
I
hear
mean,
it.
I can't remember. It wasn't even the biggest thing I said. It's not like indirect censorship or anything. What was it? It was about so I mean, I mentioned Dohabi as being supported by Rothschilds. There's the maybe. Well, I can't remember to be honest.
Uh, that's okay. We were talking about World War One. So after World War One,
Oh yeah, that
the
it might have been partly. It might have involved creating a situation where the Bedouin tribes could have been a way for them. Yeah, they might have used the opposition that they would have had to the Ottomans to create Saudi Arabia, which they could control, to create Wahhabism. That's very tangential, I'm guessing here.
Yeah, there was an agreement called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. So when the Ottoman Empire was defeated by the end of World War One, the Russians, the French, and the English, they all got together and they had this agreement how to carve up the Middle East. So yeah, it goes all the way back to that. Saudi Arabia and Israel, I mean, ultimately you got to conclude that these countries were created and cultivated as part of the plan to carve up the Middle East. One of the reasons as well is against Russia, as a buffer against Russia.
All right, here's another question, moving to something else. Do you think, so what's your conspiracy take on the riots in America?
Which
the Floyd riots and that sort of
thing. I mean, I don't really think there's a conspiracy as such. Going back to what I said right at the beginning, like the war on drugs is about oppressing Black people, and
why are they doing that? What's the benefit?
Oh, it's just about suppressing, and it's another part of divide and conquer.
So it's to create resentment and a conflict between. It's to create race war.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they don't want people uniting. It helps control the population. So, and then, there's a lot of resentment. There's all sorts of racist things that have gone on throughout American history. But yeah, it is disgusting when you see all the people who are just, all they've done is taken drugs and they've in prison at the moment for years, and they work on slave wages and these big corporations, because all the prison system's all privatized. So these big corporations are essentially turning drug addicts into slaves, and the Blacks are targeted for drug use. I mean, there's a whole big thing. It goes back to slavery. Like there's always been propaganda installed into our heads. So like we hate Black people. One of the things is the myth that Black people have massive penises, which when you look at scientific research, it's not actually true. The man with the biggest penis in the world is actually a white man called Jonah Falcon. But if when you do your research, it all goes back to it. It's one of the reasons that they kind of desensitize people to be okay with having slaves by convincing them that Blacks were like animalistic and they would rape like white women, and to really stir up a resentment and a hate to encourage slavery. So the whole thing is it's got a long history of.
Do you think it goes both ways, in the sense that they want people to either be racist or be like fanatically anti-racist in a way that makes more people react against it? Like, if rather than having moderates who are just tolerant, do you think they want people to be polarized against each other in a big fight?
Quite possibly, to be honest, quite possibly. I mean, divide and conquer, it's one of the oldest tricks in the book. If you study history, you can find plenty of examples of divide and conquer. I mean, it's entirely possible. They are trying to, well, you look at Antifa, and they try and align these guys with the Democratic Party. So it's definitely plausible. I mean, ultimately, we just got to be like, all right, you're Black, you're Chinese, who cares?
Yeah, because we're all human, right?
Yeah, exactly. Going back to aliens as well. I mean, I've said it before, aliens who observe us, they're not going to want to be allies with us. I mean, we're fighting over skin color and religion. I mean, what intelligent aliens are going to want to be friends with us?
I'll tell you a story. I looked at this briefly. I looked inside this book earlier, actually, the Exopolitics by Michael E. Sala, and it was saying so around the time 19, just at the end of the war, more or less. Actually, this is around the time Eisenhower was president, and they were meeting up with aliens. So they encountered two groups. In 1945, they encountered a group of aliens who were very insistent, get rid of all your nuclear weapons, don't do this, end your conflict over wars. They were very like, work together, stop being so warlike and all of that. The nuclear weapons was a big issue. And they were actually, basically, America wasn't well receptive to that message because they were in a they'd just been in a war. They were suspicious of Russia and all of that, and they wanted to use nuclear weapons of power. So they didn't actually agree to that, and instead they ended up making a treaty with another group of aliens, the Zetas. Now the Zetas are, according to those who research aliens, the self-serving ones who want power and control and are manipulative. So that's who America allied with at the end of the war. And apparently they haven't exactly been very trustworthy since that alliance, that agreement, that treaty anyway. So
yeah, it's interesting. I love to see who, like, a list of all the people who say that this is true. I mean, I'm not just
aliens.
Yeah, I mean, I need that's a genuine quote.
Well, I would check out the book if you want to research the alien topic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, it would change my whole kind of view on history if that was true. I mean, I can't really comment, but I mean, it could be true. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Nick. That's what I can say.
That's all right. You go with evidence. You
Yeah.
try to be thorough with that, and that's a key part of it. Like you need some people to be a bit more speculative, and other people to be like, okay, what's the solid evidence here? Let's make a thorough investigation.
But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was true. I mean, I certainly believe aliens have visited, but that's about as far as I can go on that.
So, what haven't we gone into yet? What other conspiracy theories are you passionate about or interested in that you want to talk about?
Well, I'd like to go over Prince Andrew raping a sex slave. So I've been accusing the royal family of being involved in child trafficking for about 9 years. And recently it seems I've been validated, which I'm quite happy about. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there, they won't admit it's true. They can't admit it. They can't bring themselves because their egos and just their delusions can't be shattered. Or B, they know it's true, but they don't want to admit it because they're worried about what it would mean for the UK. And then there are people who will just cover it up because they're corrupted. Then there are people like me who said, no, we can't have this. This isn't acceptable. Sex trafficking, these poor girls. So yeah, a lot of people are like, all right, Prince Andrew, I don't believe he's guilty. He hasn't gone to court. He hasn't been found guilty. But that's the thing. There's enough evidence to take him to court. I mean, there are plenty of stories you can find. People go to court and the only person that's got any evidence is just some girl accusing some guy, and that's it. But with Prince Andrew, I mean, we've got Epstein's mentor, Stephen Hoffenberg, saying that Andrew is guilty, one of Epstein's best friends. We've got Palace Security, who said that Prince Andrew is full of shit and that there are very anal security records on him. And the fact that he can't produce any records. Just doesn't add up. Then, of course, we've got Virginia's testimony. We know Virginia was, in fact, a sex slave of Epstein's. So the question is, why would Virginia lie? I mean, Prince Andrew's a big face. It's not something you're going to put your reputation on. She spent thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands on trying to prosecute Prince Andrew. So, I mean, she's not, I don't believe she's just doing it for attention. I believe in Virginia. She's got the photo with him. You know, the photo is legitimate. People try and question the the legitimacy of the photo. But yeah, we all know it's true. The FBI didn't question it.
Yeah.
And then, we've got records that shows that Prince Andrew was around or in the same locations as Virginia at the times where Virginia says that she was raped, such as flight records. Epstein's pilot says Prince Andrew is pretty much guilty and he flew him. So we've got all this information, and Andrew just isn't going to court. I mean, the royal family are trying to cover it up. I mean, he's been disgraced. He's been stripped of his titles. He wasn't even invited to Philip's wedding.
Yeah, I think most people know this is going on. Well, I don't know about that, but a lot of people wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, he's quite obviously guilty. I mean, none of what he says adds up. He lied. He said, well, he had a medical condition where he can't sweat, which isn't true. There are loads of photos of him sweating. Like, the thing is, and then you see him talking. He's trying to talk about, oh, I served in the Falklands, but he's only doing that to get popularity. I mean, I don't believe he was in any real danger in the Falklands. I think the whole thing with the royal families serving in the military is just propaganda. I mean,
wouldn't let them be in danger.
Yeah, I mean, there's serving in the military, then there's risking your life for your country. They're two completely different things. They try and paint them as heroes. I mean, this has been going on for thousands of years, trying to paint kings as warrior kings.
There was a time where they did actually fight in battle a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I do believe it was, there's a lot of myth over that, though.
But being a warrior king isn't like actually good thing. It's actually like it's something to be proud of, right?
Oh well, it gets popularity. If people are like, if this guy's telling me to fight and he's fighting, then I'll fight. But if this guy's telling me to fight but he won't fight, it's like very demotivating.
I suppose so, but just like, if you really think about it, like, they're warmongers, right? Now, I can respect people like Caesar simply for their ability, right? But there's no way around it. People like Caesar, Napoleon, they're often horrible people. Dark triad personality traits and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree. I don't think war's necessary, really. I mean, it's only necessary because humans are egotistical and selfish. I mean, there's no really good reason for it.
Do you think we can get past that and be more loving?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I think it's the next stage in evolution. I think the only way to go really is, I mean, we've got the resources we can turn desert. We've got the technology to turn desert into fully functioning soil. We can grow food. I mean, there isn't really a population control problem if we use education. I mean, some will call me an idealist, but when it's a choice between that and a world war, I mean, you got to go for sustainable methods and reaching out into the solar system to colonize.
0-point energy.
Sorry?
What is 0-point energy or Tesla's sort of energy?
Yeah, I mean, Tesla does some good stuff, but
no, Nikola Tesla's technology. that was
Oh,
suppressed.
oh, yes. Yeah. I love some research going to that. I've seen some studies of his tower. I mean, if it is all true, it makes me very angry. I mean, you can only conclude that it never happened because people didn't want to give up their profits and power.
Right.
Um, I mean, yeah. I mean, I think if we're gonna make it, we need this technology, and yeah, people are gonna have to give up their power and selfishness. But I mean, it's the only way to go, really.
So
I mean,
we've got to
otherwise we're
reclaim
doomed for destruction. Yeah.
the
Sorry.
people have to be proactive in not the people out there. We need to be proactive in not just complying to things and actually demanding, you know, liberty and like transparency. Because a lot of the time it depends on us just going along with it, right? Because as you said, like they don't have total control. It's there, and there's more of us than them.
Mm,
So
mm,
it's not guaranteed that their plans for like this new economic system that they seem to be planning, like or whatever it is, like
mm.
oh, that's another thing to talk about actually. I've heard that there's the Great Reset. What do you know about that?
Um, Enlighten me.
I honestly I haven't done that. I'm not that much research on it, but some are saying that they're using the pandemic as a cover for using that situation when the economy shuts down and all the people being shut in to reset the whole economy on the
Mm,
basis that there's so much debt that the economy's a zombie economy at this point anyway, and that
mm,
perhaps they're using this to create a new system and they're going to have a much more controlled command economy where we have no freedom and that they want like and they have all the power and that's what they're trying to do.
mm, mm.
The question is, will the people stand for it? And that what that comes down to is I don't know for sure. That's up to individuals and people in society as a whole to really they can't actually make it happen unless we just go along with it, right?
Exactly. At the end of the day, if we all stood up, they'd be absolutely screwed. I mean, they're outnumbered vastly. Um, the only barrier really is this system of brainwashing that goes on. And I mean, they convince people that they need the elite, or that like these, or they lie about like what coronavirus really is and how dangerous it really is. I mean, we need better scientists. That's one of the big problems, and we need good ethical scientists who've got a big platform as well. But yeah, this big reset thing, hey, it could happen. I mean, I've seen uh, an interview with this guy called Aaron Russo. He gets interviews, and he was a good friend of Nicholas Rockefeller. And he said the ultimate plan is to get everyone chipped, everyone controlled, and
Yeah,
everyone's
there's
got a
that.
tracking chip with their money.
Don't
And
take the
if they
vaccine.
don't like you, they'll take your money off you, and then you'll be broke.
There was a
Um,
movie about that. There was actually a movie where people have chips in them, and that's how much lifespan they have, right?
oh yeah, what with Justin Timberlake?
I think it had him in it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was. Oh yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it's a good concept, good movie. When money is time, and they say, yeah, yeah. But I mean, ultimately, these guys. I mean, they want all of this control, and I mean, part of it is humanity's problem. I mean, if humans were more respectful, and if we were more enlightened, and we weren't so divided over the stupid little differences, like for example, Sunni and Shia Islam. I mean, when you actually look at the differences and how much these guys hate each other, it's just nonsense. I mean, who
Yeah.
gives a crap? You think this guy's the prophet? I mean, who the hell cares?
But people do that over
That
politics, over small differences. Like for example, if you look at anarchists and you look at socialists and you
mm,
look at Marxists, there's all these small little disagreements, and they argue over a lot of different things. And then within each of those categories, there's a lot of different arguments going on as well. That's just one example. Like for each of these ideologies, and there's all this divide and conquer going on for each of these groups, psychops and everything. Like
yeah,
it's psychological warfare, a lot of this.
it is, and it's part of the problem that there's not a mutual respect, or there's not a neighborly mindset. And I mean, part of the reason is the world's maybe maybe you could say the world's overly competitive.
Egotistical.
Yeah, egotistical. Uh, yeah, like that's why I believe one of the big things, if we did implement all this free energy and start using these resources better, I just think everyone would be more content and everyone would be happier. I mean, one of the reasons, people get so annoyed is because their life isn't going that well. And yeah, I mean, the new industrial revolution that would boost the economy with all this energy, it would create real wealth. And I've been to, I mean, you go to somewhere like Gibraltar or Queenstown, which is a beautiful place and a bit wealthy, and you can see everyone's nicer to each other, and everyone's nicer to each other because people are just more content with their lives.
Yeah, especially if you go to like Bhutan or something.
Oh yeah, I've never been.
I haven't been there either, but from what I've heard, they're pretty peaceful. Like some, you go to see Tibetan monks, right, or that sort of thing. They'll, um, yeah. I mean, I feel like right. So I'm wondering, perhaps what we need is a sort of the good thing about the internet is that people can learn about psychology and people can learn about, well, conspiracy theories, definitely.
Mm,
And
mm,
people can learn about maybe important spiritual practices, even like meditation that can help people out, right? And
yeah,
maybe we can become more mindful that way. Because a lot of this is they play on our egos and they play on
yeah,
our fears.
yeah.
So if we can sort out ourselves psychologically, we're less vulnerable to manipulation and they can't control us.
Exactly. And we're more likely to not fly off the handle when someone who's got a different political ideology annoys us, and it stops the division, which is ultimately, I mean, it's what we want. We, as I said, if we unite, if we all pull in the same direction, things will get better.
Yeah, well, on that note, I think that this is a good point to end because that's a really positive note that
Sounds good.
yeah. So I hope you enjoyed it, listeners, and I certainly enjoyed this conversation with Ed Amos.
And I
So,
enjoyed it as well. Well, Nick, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Maybe we could do another one down the line.
oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. So all right, bye everyone, and see you again.